The dust cloud rising from the stage-coach wheels was the first sign Penelope Crawford had that her entire life was about to change, though she did not know it yet, as she pressed her face against the rattling window and watched the sprawling Texas landscape roll past in shades of brown and gold. It was June of 1878, and the heat pressed down on everything like a heavy blanket soaked in the sun. Penelope had been traveling for 3 weeks now, all the way from Philadelphia, and every mile had taken her further from everything she had ever known and closer to a future she had not chosen for herself. Her father had arranged the marriage before he died, leaving her with nothing but debts, and a binding agreement with a cattle baron named Marcus Thornhill, who owned land near a settlement called Chisholm Ranch in Lincoln County, New Mexico Territory. She had seen a daguerreotype of Thornhill once, a stern man with cold eyes and a mouth that looked like it had forgotten how to smile. The photograph sat in her reticule now, and she had not looked at it in days, because doing so made her stomach turn with dread. The stagecoach lurched over a particularly rough patch of road, and Penelope braced herself against the worn leather seat. Across from her sat an older woman who had introduced herself as Mrs. Dalton, a widow returning to her son's ranch after visiting family back east. The woman had been kind, sharing her water and dried meat when Penelope's own provisions ran low, and offering stories of life in the territory that were equal parts fascinating and terrifying. "You will see Chisholm Ranch soon," Mrs. Dalton said now, peering out her own window. "Just over that next rise. It is not much to look at, mind you, but it is home to good people. Mostly ranchers and their hands, a few shopkeepers, the usual sort." Penelope nodded, trying to smooth the wrinkles from her traveling dress with trembling fingers. She was 20 years old, and she felt like a girl being sent to the gallows. Marriage to Thornhill meant security, a roof over her head, and an end to the crushing debt her father had left behind. But it also meant binding herself to a stranger, living in a wild and lawless place, and giving up any dreams she might have had for her own life. The stagecoach crested the rise, and there it was Chisholm Ranch, a collection of weathered buildings clustered along a dusty main street. There was a general store, a saloon, a blacksmith shop, and what looked like a land office. Scattered around were houses and corrals, and beyond that, the endless expanse of prairie stretched away to distant mountains that shimmered blue in the afternoon heat. The stage rolled to a stop in front of the general store, and the driver climbed down to help his passengers out. Penelope accepted his hand and stepped down onto the street, her legs unsteady after so many hours sitting. The sun beat down on her bonnet, and she felt sweat beginning to trickle down her spine beneath her corset and layers of petticoats. "Miss Crawford," a voice called out, and Penelope turned to see a man approaching. He was shorter than she expected, with a round belly straining against a brocade vest and a face that was red from sun and possibly drink. "I am Marcus Thornhill. Welcome to New Mexico Territory." His voice was flat, businesslike, and he did not smile. Penelope forced herself to curtsy. "Mr. Thornhill, thank you for meeting me." "Your trunk will be brought to my house," Thornhill said, barely looking at her. "We will be married tomorrow morning. The preacher comes through once a month, and tomorrow is the day. Fortunate timing. Tomorrow." The word hit Penelope like a physical blow. She had known the marriage would happen quickly, but somehow she had hoped for a few days to adjust, to prepare herself. "So soon," she managed to say. "No point in waiting," Thornhill replied. "I have business to attend to. My housekeeper will show you to your room." He gestured to a dour woman in black who stood waiting by a wagon. Without another word, he turned and walked away, already dismissing her. Penelope stood frozen in the street, watching him go. This was the man she would be bound to for the rest of her life. The realization crashed over her like a wave, and for a moment she could not breathe. "Come along, miss," the housekeeper said sharply, and Penelope followed on numb legs, climbing into the wagon and letting herself be driven away. That evening, Penelope lay in a narrow bed in a spare room of Thornhill's large house and stared at the ceiling. The house was well appointed, filled with expensive furniture that looked out of place in this rough country, but it felt cold and empty. Thornhill had not joined her for dinner, and the housekeeper had made it clear that Penelope was expected to be ready for the ceremony at 8 o'clock the following morning. Sleep would not come. Penelope rose and went to the window, looking out over the dark landscape. In the distance, she could see the warm glow of lights from the saloon and hear the faint sound of a piano playing. She thought of her life in Philadelphia, her friends, the small dreams she had once harbored of marrying for love. All of that was gone now, swept away by her father's gambling debts and poor business decisions. A tear slipped down her cheek, and then another, and soon she was crying silently, her shoulders shaking as she pressed her hand to her mouth to muffle the sound. The morning came too quickly. Penelope dressed in her best gown, a pale blue silk that had been her mother's, and let the housekeeper pin up her dark hair. She looked at herself in the mirror and barely recognized the pale, frightened face staring back at her. "Time to go," the housekeeper said, and Penelope followed her down the stairs and out to the wagon. The ceremony was to take place at the small church on the edge of town. As they drove through the streets, Penelope saw people going about their morning business, cowboys loading supplies, women sweeping porches, children chasing a dog through the dust. Normal life continuing while hers was about to change forever. Then she saw him. He was standing in front of the land office, a tall man in worn denim and a sun-faded shirt, with a hat pulled low over his face. As the wagon passed, he looked up, and their eyes met for just a moment. He had a strong, weathered face, tanned from years in the sun, and eyes that were a startling shade of blue-green. Something passed between them in that brief glance, some spark of recognition that made no sense at all, and then the wagon rolled on and he was gone from view. Penelope's heart was pounding, and she did not understand why. She had seen the man for only a second, yet the image of his face was burned into her mind. The church was small and plain, with rough wooden pews and a simple cross hanging on the wall. Thornhill was already there, standing at the front with the preacher. He looked impatient, checking his pocket watch as Penelope walked down the aisle. The ceremony was brief and joyless. Penelope spoke her vows in a voice that barely rose above a whisper, and when Thornhill placed the ring on her finger, his hand was cold and impersonal. He kissed her perfunctorily on the cheek, and then it was done. She was Mrs. Marcus Thornhill. "I have business to attend to," Thornhill said immediately after the ceremony ended. "I will be away for 3 days. Settle yourself into the house." And then he was gone, striding out of the church without a backward glance. Penelope stood alone at the altar, her new wedding ring heavy on her finger, and felt more alone than she ever had in her life. The housekeeper, Mrs. Garrett, drove her back to the house in silence. Penelope spent the rest of the day unpacking her trunk and arranging her few belongings in the bedroom that was now hers. Thornhill had a separate room down the hall, and she was grateful for that small mercy. She could not bear the thought of sharing a bed with a man who looked at her with such indifference. As evening fell, Penelope found she could not stay in the house any longer. She needed air, space, something to ease the suffocating feeling in her chest. She slipped out the back door and began to walk, following a path that led away from the house and toward open country. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, and the air was finally beginning to cool. Penelope walked until she found herself at a small creek, its water moving slowly over smooth stones. She sat down on the bank and let herself cry again, this time not bothering to hold back the sobs. "Are you all right, madam?" The voice startled her, and Penelope looked up quickly to see a man standing a few yards away, his hat in his hands. It took her a moment to recognize him. It was the man she had seen that morning, the one standing in front of the land office. "I am fine," she said quickly, wiping at her tears and trying to compose herself. "I apologize. I did not mean to disturb anyone." "You are not disturbing me," the man said gently. "I have a claim just over that rise, and I was checking on my cattle when I heard someone crying. I wanted to make sure you were not hurt or in trouble." He had a low, warm voice with a slight drawl, and there was genuine concern in his eyes. Penelope found herself unable to look away from him. "I am not hurt," she said. "Just overwhelmed, I suppose. I arrived yesterday, and today I was married, and everything is so different from what I knew." The man's expression shifted, something flickering across his face that might have been disappointment. "You are Thornhill's new wife," he said, and it was not a question. "Yes." The word felt like a confession. The man was silent for a moment, then he stepped closer and sat down on a rock a respectful distance away. "My name is Isaac Norris," he said. "I have 160 acres just north of here. I filed my claim 3 years ago and have been building it up since then." "Penelope Crawford," she said, then corrected herself. "Penelope Thornhill now, I suppose." "Pleased to meet you, Mrs. Thornhill," Isaac said, though his tone was formal now distant. They sat in silence for a moment, listening to the creek burble past. Finally, Penelope spoke. "What is it like living out here? Is it always so harsh?" Isaac considered the question. "It can be harsh," he admitted. "The land does not give up anything easily, and there are droughts and hard winters and all manner of challenges. But there is also a freedom here that you cannot find anywhere else. When I wake up in the morning and look out over my land, knowing I built it with my own 2 hands, that I am beholden to no man, there is no feeling quite like it." The passion in his voice was unmistakable, and Penelope found herself leaning forward, drawn to his words. "That sounds wonderful," she said softly. "You not feel that way about being here?" Isaac asked, looking at her closely. Penelope laughed, a bitter sound. "I did not choose to be here," she said. "My father arranged the marriage before he died, and I had no choice but to honor it. I have never felt less free in my life." The words hung in the air between them, more honest than Penelope had meant to be. She saw sympathy in Isaac's eyes and something else she could not quite name. "I am sorry," he said quietly. "That is a hard thing." They talked as the sun sank below the horizon, and the stars began to appear, scattered across the vast sky like diamonds on velvet. Isaac told her about his life, how he had come west from Missouri after the war, looking for a fresh start. He described building his cabin with his own hands, breaking the land for planting, raising his small herd of cattle. He spoke of the challenges he had faced, the loneliness, the back-breaking work, the uncertainty of whether he would succeed or fail. Penelope found herself telling him things she had never told anyone about her childhood in Philadelphia, her love of reading and music, her dreams of traveling and seeing the world. She told him about her father's descent into gambling and drink after her mother died, how the debts had piled up until there was nothing left. "He loved me, I think," she said, "but he was weak, and in the end his weakness destroyed both of our lives." "Your life is not destroyed," Isaac said firmly. "You are here and you are alive, and that means there is still hope." Penelope looked at him, this stranger who spoke with such conviction, and felt something shift inside her. For the first time since leaving Philadelphia, she felt like someone actually saw her, really saw her as a person rather than a burden or an obligation. "I should return to the house," she said reluctantly, though she did not want to leave. "Mrs. Garrett will worry." Isaac stood and offered her his hand to help her up. When their fingers touched, Penelope felt a jolt of electricity run through her. Isaac must have felt it too because he held her hand a moment longer than necessary before releasing it. "May I walk you back?" he asked. "I would like that," Penelope said. They walked slowly through the gathering darkness, neither of them speaking but both acutely aware of the other's presence. When they reached the edge of Thornhill's property, Isaac stopped. "I will leave you here," he said. "It would not be proper for me to be seen walking with you." "No, I suppose not," Penelope agreed, though the thought of propriety made her want to laugh. What did propriety matter when she was trapped in a loveless marriage to a man who barely acknowledged her existence? "Goodbye, Mrs. Thornhill," Isaac said, and there was a weight to the words that suggested finality. "Goodbye, Mr. Norris," Penelope replied. "Thank you for your kindness." She watched him walk away, his figure disappearing into the darkness, and felt an ache in her chest that was almost physical. She had known him for only an hour, yet somehow the thought of never seeing him again was unbearable. The next 3 days passed slowly. Penelope occupied herself with exploring the house and grounds, reading the few books she had brought with her, and trying to imagine a future that did not feel like a prison sentence. Mrs. Garrett was not unkind, but she was not warm either, and Penelope felt desperately alone. On the 4th day, Thornhill returned. He came into the house in the late afternoon, dusty from travel, and barely greeted Penelope before heading to his study. She waited for him to call for her, to want to speak with her or spend time with his new wife, but the call never came. That evening, they ate dinner in silence at opposite ends of a long table, and afterward, Thornhill retired to his study with a bottle of whiskey. This became the pattern of their days. Thornhill was gone more often than not, dealing with his cattle business and other affairs Penelope knew nothing about. When he was home, he ignored her completely, treating her presence as an inconvenience. They were married in name only, and Penelope realized with a strange mixture of relief and sadness that this was likely how her entire life would be. 2 weeks after her wedding, Penelope could not stand the confines of the house any longer. She told Mrs. Garrett she was going for a walk and set off toward the creek where she had met Isaac. She told herself she was simply seeking fresh air and solitude, but she knew she was hoping to see him again. He was there, working on a fence near the water. When he saw her, his face lit up with a smile that made Penelope's heart skip. "Mrs. Thornhill," he said, setting down his tools and walking over to her. "This is a pleasant surprise. Please call me Penelope," she said. "I cannot bear the sound of that name." Isaac's expression grew serious. "That would not be proper," he said gently. "Nothing about my life is proper anymore," Penelope said, and she could hear the bitterness in her own voice. "I am married to a man who does not want me, living in a place I did not choose with no friends and no future to look forward to. Surely I can at least be called by my own name." Isaac looked at her for a long moment and she saw the conflict in his eyes. Finally, he nodded. "Penelope," he said, and the way he said her name, softly and with care, made her want to cry. "How is your fence coming?" she asked, trying to lighten the mood. "Slowly," Isaac admitted. "I am no carpenter and I am learning as I go, but it will hold eventually." "May I help?" The words were out before Penelope could stop them. Isaac looked surprised. "You want to help me build a fence?" "I want to do something useful," Penelope said. "I have been sitting in that house for weeks doing nothing but reading and staring at walls. Please let me help. Even if I am terrible at it, at least I will feel like I am doing something." Isaac hesitated, then smiled. "All right," he said. "But I warn you, it is hard work." He was right, it was hard work. Penelope had never done manual labor in her life, and her hands were soft and unused to such activity. But Isaac was patient, showing her how to hold the hammer, how to drive the nails, how to measure and cut the wood. She made mistakes, hitting her thumb more than once and dropping nails in the grass, but she kept at it. And for the first time since coming to New Mexico territory, she felt truly alive. They worked together for hours, and as they worked, they talked. Isaac told her about his dreams for his land, how he wanted to build a proper house, increase his herd, maybe even plant some crops. Penelope told him about the books she loved, the music she missed, the life she had left behind. "You ever regret coming here?" Penelope asked him. Isaac shook his head. "Not for a moment. Everything I have here I built myself. That means something. Back in Missouri, I was just another farm hand working someone else's land for wages that barely kept me fed. Here I am my own man." "I envy you that," Penelope said quietly. Isaac looked at her, and the sympathy in his eyes was almost too much to bear. "You are in a difficult situation," he said. "I wish there was something I could do to help." "You are helping," Penelope said, "more than you know. Just having someone to talk to, someone who sees me as a person and not just an obligation or a piece of property, that helps." Their eyes met and held, and Penelope felt that same electric current that had run between them the first time they touched. Isaac looked away first, clearing his throat. "It is getting late," he said. "You should probably head back before people start to wonder where you are." Penelope knew he was right, but she did not want to leave. Here with Isaac, she felt like herself. Back at Thornhill's house, she felt like a ghost haunting rooms that would never be home. "May I come back?" she asked. "Tomorrow, I mean, to help with the fence." Isaac hesitated, and Penelope could see him wrestling with the decision. Finally, he nodded. "Yes," he said, "I would like that," and so it became their routine. Every day, Penelope would tell Mrs. Garrett she was going for a walk, and every day she would make her way to Isaac's land. They worked side by side, building fences and repairing the cabin roof and tending to the cattle. Isaac taught her how to ride a horse properly, not the side saddle way she had learned back east, but astride, with control and confidence. He showed her how to rope a calf, how to start a fire with flint and steel, how to read the weather in the clouds and the behavior of the animals. And as the days turned into weeks, they fell in love. It was not a sudden thing, but a gradual awakening, like the slow brightening of dawn. Penelope found herself thinking about Isaac constantly, looking forward to their time together with an eagerness that both thrilled and terrified her. She memorized everything about him, the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled, the sound of his laugh, the careful gentleness of his hands when he taught her something new. She learned that he liked his coffee black and sweet, that he had fought for the Union during the war and still had nightmares about it sometimes, that his favorite time of day was early morning when the world was quiet and full of possibility. Isaac, for his part, tried to maintain proper distance. He called her Mrs. Thornhill in front of others, and was always careful never to touch her in ways that might suggest impropriety. But Penelope could see the way he looked at her when he thought she was not watching, could feel the tension in the air between them growing stronger with each passing day. One afternoon, in late August, they were working on clearing brush near the creek when a sudden rainstorm blew in. The sky opened up without warning, drenching them both in seconds. Isaac grabbed Penelope's hand, and they ran for his cabin, laughing and gasping as the rain pounded down. Inside, Isaac quickly started a fire while Penelope stood dripping on the rough wooden floor, shivering despite the warmth of the day. The cabin was small and spare, just one room with a bed in the corner, a table and chairs, and a fireplace. But it was clean and well kept, and there were little touches that spoke of care: a rag rug on the floor, curtains on the window, a shelf of books. "Here," Isaac said, bringing her a blanket. "You should get out of that wet dress before you catch cold." Penelope looked at him, at the concern in his eyes, and something inside her made a decision. She was tired of being proper, tired of denying what she felt. She was trapped in a loveless marriage to a man who would not even notice if she disappeared, and here was Isaac, this good, kind man who made her feel alive for the first time in her life. "Isaac," she said quietly. He looked at her, and the intensity of his gaze made her breath catch. "We should not," he said, but his voice was rough with wanting. "I know," Penelope said. She stepped closer to him. "I know it is wrong, I know all the reasons why we should not. But Isaac, I cannot keep pretending I do not feel what I feel. I am in love with you." The words hung in the air between them. Isaac closed his eyes, and Penelope could see the struggle written across his face. "I am in love with you too," he said finally, opening his eyes to look at her. "I have been since the first moment I saw you, but Penelope, you are married. You are another man's wife. We cannot—" "I am married to a man who does not want me," Penelope interrupted. "Who treats me like furniture, who barely speaks to me. That is not a real marriage, Isaac. It is a legal arrangement, nothing more." "The law does not care about that," Isaac said. "If Thornhill found out about us, he could have me arrested, or worse." "Then we will be careful," Penelope said. She reached out and took his hand, lacing her fingers through his. "Please, Isaac, I am not asking for forever. I am just asking for this moment, this one piece of happiness in a life that has had so little of it." Isaac looked down at their joined hands, then back up at her face. "If we do this," he said slowly, "there is no going back. Everything will change." "Everything has already changed," Penelope said. "The moment I met you, everything changed." Isaac drew her close then, wrapping his arms around her, and Penelope rested her head against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. They stood like that for a long time, just holding each other while the rain drummed on the roof and the fire crackled in the hearth. When Isaac finally kissed her, it was tender and careful, as if she was something precious that might break. Penelope kissed him back with all the longing and desperation she had been holding inside, and felt tears streaming down her cheeks. "I am sorry," she whispered against his lips. "I am sorry for crying." "Do not be sorry," Isaac said, brushing the tears away with his thumbs. "Do not ever be sorry for feeling something real." They made love slowly, carefully, Isaac treating her with a gentleness and respect that made Penelope's heart ache. Afterward, they lay together on his narrow bed, Penelope's head on his shoulder, his arms wrapped around her. "What are we going to do?" Penelope asked quietly. "I do not know," Isaac admitted, "but we will figure something out, somehow." Penelope wanted to believe him, but she knew the reality of their situation. She was legally bound to Thornhill, and there was no easy way out of that. Divorce was scandalous and nearly impossible to obtain. Running away together would make them both fugitives, and Isaac would lose his land claim, everything he had worked for. They were trapped, and they both knew it. But for now, in this moment, none of that mattered. For now they had each other, and that was enough. The affair continued through the fall and into winter. Penelope became expert at slipping away, at finding excuses to leave the house. Thornhill never questioned her absences. He was too wrapped up in his own affairs to care what his wife did with her time. Mrs. Garrett was more observant, but if she suspected anything, she kept it to herself. Isaac's cabin became Penelope's true home, the place where she was most herself. She helped him prepare for winter, storing food and firewood, repairing gaps in the walls where cold air might creep in. She learned to cook over the fireplace, to make bread and stew and coffee that Isaac declared was the best he had ever tasted. She read to him in the evenings from her books, and he taught her to play simple songs on the harmonica he kept in his pocket. They were playing house, Penelope knew, creating a life that could never truly be theirs. But it was sweet and precious, and she hoarded every moment like a miser hoards gold. In November, Thornhill announced he would be traveling to Santa Fe on business and would be gone for 3 weeks. Penelope hid her elation behind a mask of wifely concern. 3 weeks of freedom, 3 weeks when she could spend every day and night with Isaac without fear of discovery. The first night after Thornhill left, Penelope packed a bag and went to Isaac's cabin. When he opened the door and saw her standing there with her belongings, his face went through a rapid series of emotions: surprise, joy, concern. "Thornhill is gone," she said simply. "For 3 weeks. I am not spending a single night in that house when I could be here with you." Isaac pulled her inside and kissed her thoroughly. "You are sure about this?" he asked when they finally broke apart. "I have never been more sure of anything," Penelope said. Those 3 weeks were the happiest of Penelope's life. She and Isaac lived as husband and wife, falling into an easy domestic rhythm. They woke with the sun and worked together during the day, then spent the evenings by the fire, talking and laughing and making love. Isaac was teaching her to shoot, patiently correcting her stance and her aim until she could hit a target more often than not. "You are a natural," he told her one afternoon, grinning with pride as she hit the center of the target 3 times in a row. "I had a good teacher," Penelope said, smiling back at him. They were standing close together, and Isaac reached out to tuck a strand of hair behind her ear. "I wish this could last forever," he said quietly. "So do I," Penelope said, and the sadness in her voice was unmistakable. That night as they lay in bed, Isaac said, "Come away with me." Penelope's heart leaped. "What? Come away with me?" Isaac repeated, propping himself up on one elbow to look down at her. "We could go to California or up to Montana. Somewhere far away where no one knows us, where we could start over." "But your land," Penelope said. "Your claim, you have worked so hard for it." "What does land matter if you are not there with me?" Isaac said, and the intensity in his voice made her breath catch. "I have been thinking about this for weeks, Penelope. I love you. I want to spend my life with you. The land, the claim, none of it means anything if I cannot share it with you." Tears welled up in Penelope's eyes. "But you would lose everything." 3 years of work, your home, your future. "You are my future," Isaac interrupted. "Do you not see that? I would give up everything I have for the chance to be with you properly as your husband. We could build a new life together, somewhere fresh where your marriage to Thornhill does not matter." "It will always matter," Penelope said sadly. "I am legally bound to him. Running away will not change that." "Then we will live as man and wife without the legal paper," Isaac said. "I do not care about legal documents, Penelope. I care about you." Penelope wanted to say yes. Every fiber of her being wanted to throw caution to the wind and run away with Isaac to start a new life. But she also knew the practical realities. They would be fugitives, always looking over their shoulders, always worried that Thornhill would find them. Isaac would lose not just his land, but any chance of ever claiming land again. Breaking a claim was a serious offense. And what if they had children? What kind of life would that be for them, born to parents who were not legally married, always living in fear? "I need time to think," she said finally. Isaac nodded, though she could see the disappointment in his eyes. "Take all the time you need," he said. "But Penelope, we cannot keep living like this indefinitely. Something has to give." She knew he was right. The situation was unsustainable. Eventually, someone would find out about their affair. Eventually, there would be consequences. But she could not bear the thought of Isaac giving up everything for her, especially when there was no guarantee their plan would work. The next morning, Penelope woke to find Isaac already up and dressed. "I need to go into town for supplies," he said. "Come with me. You have been hiding out here for 2 weeks. You should show your face so people do not talk." Penelope agreed, though she hated the thought of leaving their little bubble of happiness. They rode into Chisholm Ranch together, and Isaac was careful to keep a proper distance, treating her with the polite deference due to another man's wife. At the general store, Penelope was examining bolts of fabric when she heard a familiar voice. "Mrs. Thornhill, what a surprise to see you here." Penelope turned to see a woman she vaguely recognized from church, Mrs. Henderson, wife of one of the local ranchers. "Good morning, Mrs. Henderson," she said politely. "I had heard your husband was away on business," Mrs. Henderson said, her eyes sharp and curious. "Are you managing all right on your own?" "Quite well, thank you," Penelope said, keeping her voice light and pleasant. "Mrs. Garrett is taking excellent care of me." "I am sure she is," Mrs. Henderson said, though her tone suggested she thought no such thing. Her eyes drifted to where Isaac was talking with the store owner, then back to Penelope. "Mr. Norris is a fine young man, is he not? Working so hard on his claim. It is a shame he has no wife to help him." The implication was clear, and Penelope felt her cheeks flush. "He does seem very industrious," she said carefully. "Quite," Mrs. Henderson said, still watching her closely. "Well, I must be going. Do give your husband my regards when he returns." After she left, Isaac came over to Penelope. "That woman was looking at you strangely," he said in a low voice. "She suspects something," Penelope said, feeling a chill of fear. "We need to be more careful." But being careful became increasingly difficult as the days passed. Penelope found herself growing reckless, desperate to hold onto the happiness she had found with Isaac. When Thornhill's return date drew near, she felt physically ill at the thought of going back to that cold, empty house. The night before Thornhill was due back, Penelope lay awake in Isaac's arms, memorizing the feel of him, the sound of his breathing, the warmth of his body against hers. "Come away with me," Isaac said again, his voice urgent in the darkness. "Please, Penelope." "We will leave tomorrow before Thornhill returns. We will go west and never look back." "And what will we do when we get there?" Penelope asked. "How will we live?" "I will find work," Isaac said. "I am strong and I am not afraid of hard labor. We will manage somehow. We will be together, and that is all that matters." Penelope closed her eyes, feeling tears leak from beneath her lids. "I am afraid," she whispered. "I am afraid too," Isaac admitted. "But I am more afraid of losing you, of watching you go back to that house and that man and pretending nothing happened between us. I cannot do it, Penelope. I love you too much." "I love you too," Penelope said, turning in his arms to face him. "More than I have ever loved anything or anyone." "Then say yes," Isaac urged. "Say you will come with me." Penelope looked into his eyes, those beautiful blue-green eyes that had captured her from the first moment, and made her decision. "Yes," she said, "I will come with you." Isaac's face broke into a smile of pure joy, and he kissed her deeply. "We will leave at first light," he said. "Pack only what you can carry. We need to travel light and fast." They spent the rest of the night making plans. Isaac would go to the land office in the morning and officially abandon his claim, signing over the rights so there would be no question of theft or fraud. Penelope would return to Thornhill's house just long enough to gather her things, telling Mrs. Garrett she was going visiting friends. They would meet at the creek at noon and ride west together. It was not a perfect plan, but it was a plan, and it gave Penelope hope for the first time since her wedding day. She barely slept, and when dawn broke, she kissed Isaac goodbye and rode back to Thornhill's house, her heart pounding with nerves and excitement. She was really doing this. She was leaving her marriage, leaving everything behind to start a new life with the man she loved, Mrs. Garrett was surprised to see her return so early, but Penelope gave her a bright smile and said she had been for an early morning ride. She went upstairs to pack, folding her clothes carefully and selecting only the most practical items. She put her mother's jewelry in a small pouch, she might need to sell it eventually, and wrapped her few precious books in a shawl. She was just closing her bag when she heard voices downstairs. Male voices, one of them familiar, Thornhill. He was back early. Penelope's blood turned to ice. She stood frozen, listening to the sound of boots on the stairs, and then Thornhill was pushing open her bedroom door, his face flushed with anger. "Where have you been?" he demanded without preamble. "I was out for a ride," Penelope said, trying to keep her voice steady. "I did not expect you back so soon." "Clearly," Thornhill said. He strode into the room and grabbed her packed bag, dumping the contents onto the bed. "Going somewhere?" "I was organizing my things," Penelope lied, but she could hear the tremor in her voice. "Do not lie to me," Thornhill snarled. He pulled a piece of paper from his pocket and thrust it at her. "You know what this is. It is a letter from Mrs. Henderson, telling me that my wife has been seen spending a suspicious amount of time with a homesteader named Isaac Norris. She suggests that perhaps I should return home and see to my affairs." Penelope felt the room spin around her. "I have done nothing improper," she said, though the words were ashes in her mouth. "Nothing improper." Thornhill's face was purple now. "You have been carrying on with another man while I was away. Everyone in town is talking about it. Do you have any idea what this has done to my reputation?" "Your reputation?" Penelope found her voice rising despite herself. "What about my life?" "You forced me into a marriage I never wanted. You ignore me completely. You treat me like I am nothing." "You are nothing," Thornhill interrupted coldly. "You are a penniless girl whose father's debts I was kind enough to pay off. You owe me everything, including your loyalty and your obedience." The words hit Penelope like physical blows. She stood there, shaking with anger and fear, and realized that she had been a fool to think she could ever escape this. "You will never see that man again," Thornhill continued. "I am placing guards around the property. If you try to leave, they will stop you. And if I find out that Norris has been anywhere near you, I will have him arrested for adultery and theft of another man's wife." "Do you understand me?" Penelope said nothing, and Thornhill stepped closer, grabbing her arm hard enough to bruise. "Do you understand me?" "Yes," Penelope whispered. "Good." Thornhill released her and stepped back. "Now clean up this mess and make yourself presentable. We are having dinner guests tonight, and you will play the role of the dutiful wife. If you say or do anything to embarrass me further, there will be consequences." He strode out of the room, slamming the door behind him. Penelope sank to the floor, her legs unable to support her any longer. She buried her face in her hands and tried not to scream. Isaac. He would be waiting for her at the creek, and she had no way to tell him what had happened. He would wait and worry, and when she did not come, he would not know why. The day passed in a blur of misery. Penelope cleaned up her room, mechanically putting her clothes back in the wardrobe, her books back on the shelf. Downstairs, she could hear Thornhill shouting at Mrs. Garrett, laying down new rules about watching his wife. That evening, Penelope dressed in one of her finer gowns and pinned up her hair and went downstairs to play hostess for Thornhill's business associates. She smiled and made polite conversation and poured whiskey for the men while they talked about cattle prices and land deals. She felt like she was watching herself from a great distance, like the real Penelope was locked away somewhere deep inside, and this was just a shell going through the motions. The dinner seemed to last forever. But finally, the guests left, and Penelope was allowed to escape to her room. She locked the door and went to the window, looking out over the dark landscape in the direction of Isaac's cabin. Was he still waiting for her at the creek? Or had he given up and gone home, thinking she had changed her mind? The thought of what he must be feeling was almost more than she could bear. The next morning, Penelope woke to find a guard stationed outside her door. Thornhill was taking no chances. She was truly a prisoner now. Days passed in a fog of despair. Penelope barely ate, barely slept. She was a ghost haunting Thornhill's house, going through the motions of existence but feeling nothing inside. Thornhill watched her with cold satisfaction, pleased that he had reasserted his control. A week after his return, Thornhill came to her room with news. "Isaac Norris has abandoned his land claim," he said, watching her face carefully. "Apparently he decided he could not make a go of it out here and has moved on, probably back east where he belongs." Penelope felt her heart crack. Isaac had given up his claim. That meant he had gone through with the plan, had been willing to give up everything for her, and she had not been there to meet him. "You are fortunate, wife," Thornhill continued. "If he had stayed, I would have been forced to take action against him. This way, he simply disappears and the gossip will die down eventually." He left, and Penelope collapsed onto her bed, sobbing into her pillow. Isaac was gone. He thought she had abandoned him, chosen to stay with Thornhill rather than run away with him. He would never know that she had tried, that she had been willing to give up everything too. She had lost him, and it was her own fault for waiting too long, for not leaving sooner when they had the chance. The weeks dragged by. Winter settled over New Mexico territory, bringing cold winds and occasional snow. Penelope existed in a state of numbness, performing her duties as Thornhill's wife without feeling or thought. She was a doll, a puppet, going through the motions of a life that had no meaning. In early December, Mrs. Garrett came to her room one morning looking troubled. "Mrs. Thornhill, there is a man here to see you," she said quietly. Penelope looked up from the book she was pretending to read. "Who?" He would not give his name, but he said it was urgent that he speak with you. Hope flared in Penelope's chest for the first time in weeks. Could it be Isaac? Had he come back for her? She followed Mrs. Garrett downstairs, her heart pounding. But the man waiting in the parlor was not Isaac. He was older, with graying hair and kind eyes, and he was dressed in the simple clothes of a traveling preacher. "Mrs. Thornhill," he said, bowing slightly. "My name is Reverend Matthews. I am sorry to call on you unexpectedly, but I have a message from Isaac Norris." Penelope could not breathe. Is he all right?" "He is alive and well," Reverend Matthews said, "but he is very worried about you. He asked me to find you and give you this." He held out a letter. Penelope took it with shaking hands. The envelope was sealed with wax, and her name was written on the front in Isaac's strong, clear handwriting. "Thank you," she managed to say. "I will take my leave now," Reverend Matthews said. "But Mrs. Thornhill, if I may offer a word of advice, that young man loves you very much. I hope you will give serious thought to what he has written." After he left, Penelope carried the letter up to her room and locked the door. She broke the seal with trembling fingers and unfolded the paper. "My dearest Penelope," Isaac had written. "I waited for you at the creek for 3 days, hoping you would come, but you never did. I do not know what happened, whether you changed your mind or whether Thornhill discovered our plans and prevented you from leaving. But I need you to know that my offer still stands. I have given up my land claim as we discussed. I am in Santa Fe now, working as a ranch hand and saving money for our journey west. I am not giving up on us, Penelope. I love you with everything I have, and I will wait for as long as it takes. If you still want to come with me, get word to Reverend Matthews. He is a good man and he can be trusted. He will help you get away safely and he will bring you to me. I will be waiting. If you have truly decided to stay with Thornhill, if you have chosen that life over a future with me, then I will respect your decision. But I had to give you one more chance, one more opportunity to choose freedom and love over duty and obligation. I meant what I said. What is mine means nothing if you are not there. The land claim, the future I was building, none of it matters without you. I would give up everything 1,000 times over for one more day with you. Yours always, Isaac. Penelope read the letter 3 times, tears streaming down her face. He had not given up on her. He was waiting for her, still willing to throw away everything for a chance at a life together. She pressed the letter to her chest and closed her eyes, feeling something wake up inside her. The numbness that had insulated her for the past weeks began to crack and fall away, and underneath was a fierce, burning determination. She was done being a victim. She was done letting fear and duty dictate her choices. She loved Isaac and he loved her, and they deserved a chance at happiness together. That evening, Penelope began to plan in earnest. She would need to be careful to wait for the right moment. But she would find a way to escape Thornhill's house and his guards, and she would go to Isaac. Over the next 2 weeks, Penelope played the part of the obedient wife perfectly. She was polite and docile, never arguing with Thornhill, never trying to leave the house. Slowly, she noticed the guards becoming less vigilant, Thornhill becoming less suspicious. He thought he had broken her spirit, and that was exactly what Penelope wanted him to think. She learned the guards' routines, noting when they changed shifts and which parts of the property were least watched. She packed a small bag and hid it under her bed, ready to grab at a moment's notice. She waited for her chance. It came 3 days before Christmas. Thornhill announced he would be hosting a dinner party for his business associates, a grand affair that would require Mrs. Garrett's full attention in the kitchen. There would be music and drinking, and the guards would likely be distracted by the festivities. On the night of the party, Penelope dressed carefully in a dark traveling dress and waited. She played her part perfectly, greeting guests and overseeing the serving of dinner. But as the evening wore on and the whiskey flowed freely, she began to slip away, retiring to her room with a headache. No one noticed her grab her hidden bag. No one saw her slip out the back door while the guards were watching some of Thornhill's drunk guests make fools of themselves on the front lawn. No one raised an alarm as she hurried through the darkness toward the stable. She had learned to saddle a horse during her time with Isaac, and her hands moved quickly despite their trembling. She led the horse out quietly, not mounting until she was well away from the house. Then she rode like the devil was chasing her, heading for the church where Reverend Matthews had told her he was staying. She found him in the small room behind the sanctuary, reading by candlelight. When she burst in, breathless and wild-eyed, he set down his book immediately. "Mrs. Thornhill." "You came." "I need to get to Santa Fe," Penelope said urgently. "To Isaac. Can you help me?" Reverend Matthews smiled. "I have a wagon ready. I thought you might come tonight with all the commotion at Thornhill's house providing cover. We can leave within the hour." True to his word, they were on the road before midnight. Penelope sat in the back of the wagon, hidden under a tarp in case anyone should see them and report to Thornhill. Every mile that took her further from Chisholm Ranch felt like a weight lifting from her shoulders. They traveled through the night and all the next day, stopping only to rest the horses and for Reverend Matthews to catch a few hours of sleep. Penelope was too keyed up to sleep, her mind racing ahead to the moment when she would see Isaac again. They reached Santa Fe on Christmas Eve, as the sun was setting and the town was lighting candles in windows. Reverend Matthews drove through the streets to a modest boarding house and stopped the wagon. "He is staying here," he said, helping Penelope down from the wagon. "Room number 7, second floor." "Thank you," Penelope said, gripping his hand tightly. "Thank you for everything." "May God bless you both," Reverend Matthews said warmly. "Now go before I become emotional." Penelope hurried into the boarding house and up the stairs, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might burst from her chest. She found room 7 and knocked on the door, then knocked again more urgently when there was no immediate answer. The door swung open and there was Isaac, his hair disheveled and his shirt untucked, looking like he had just woken from sleep. When he saw her standing there, his eyes went wide with shock. "Penelope." His voice was rough with disbelief. "I am sorry I did not come sooner," Penelope said, and then she was crying and laughing at the same time. "Thornhill found out, he kept me prisoner, but I got away and I am here now, and Isaac, I love you. I love you so much," she could not finish, because Isaac had pulled her into the room and was kissing her, holding her so tightly she could barely breathe. She clung to him just as desperately, reassuring herself that this was real, that she had really made it, that they were truly together. When they finally broke apart, both of them were crying. Isaac framed her face with his hands, looking at her like she was something miraculous. "I thought I had lost you," he said hoarsely. "When you did not come, I thought you had changed your mind, that you had chosen to stay with him." "Never," Penelope said fiercely. "I tried to meet you that day, but Thornhill came back early. He found out about us, Isaac. He kept guards on me, he would not let me leave the house. But I found a way. I got your letter and I knew I had to find you no matter what it took." Isaac pulled her close again, burying his face in her hair. "You are here now," he said. "That is all that matters. You are here." They sat together on the edge of his narrow bed, hands clasped, telling each other everything that had happened since they were forced apart. Isaac told her about the agony of waiting at the creek, the decision to give up his claim, the journey to Santa Fe, and the back-breaking work he had been doing on a ranch outside of town to earn money for their journey west. "I gave up my claim," he said. "I signed the papers and walked away from everything I had built. And Penelope, I need you to know I do not regret it for a moment. That land meant nothing without you. What is mine means nothing if you are not there to share it with me." Fresh tears spilled down Penelope's cheeks. "You gave up everything for me." "I would do it again," Isaac said simply. "1,000 times I would do it again." Penelope leaned her head on his shoulder. "What do we do now?" she asked. "Now we start over," Isaac said. "There is a wagon train leaving for California in January. I have been saving money for our passage. We can join them, go west where no one knows us. We will find a place to settle and we will build a life together. It will not be easy, but we will be together." "That is all I want," Penelope said, "to be with you." They spent Christmas Day together in Isaac's small room, and it was the happiest Christmas Penelope could remember. They had no gifts for each other except their presence, but that was gift enough. They made love and talked and made plans for their future, and for the first time in her life, Penelope felt truly free, but their peace was short-lived. On the morning of December 26th, there was a loud knock on the door. Isaac answered it to find Reverend Matthews standing there, his face grave. "You need to leave," he said without preamble. "Now. Thornhill is in town. He has men with him, and they are asking after a young woman matching Penelope's description. It is only a matter of time before they find this place." Isaac and Penelope moved quickly, gathering their few belongings. They had so little: Penelope's small bag, Isaac's saddlebag, and the money he had saved, wrapped in a cloth and tucked in his pocket. "The wagon train leaves in 5 days, Isaac said as they hurried down the back stairs of the boarding house. "We need to hide until then." Reverend Matthews led them to a small church on the edge of town where a friend of his served as pastor. The pastor, an elderly man named Father O'Brien, welcomed them without question and showed them to a small storage room behind the sanctuary. "You can stay here as long as you need," he said kindly. "No one will think to look for you in a church." For 5 days, Isaac and Penelope hid in that small room, barely daring to venture out even for meals. Father O'Brien brought them food and news Thornhill was still searching, offering a reward for information about his runaway wife. But the trail had gone cold, and after a few days, he seemed to give up and return to Chisholm Ranch. On the morning of December 31st, Isaac and Penelope joined the wagon train heading west. There were about 20 wagons in all, filled with families and prospectors and people like them, seeking new opportunities in California. No one asked too many questions about their past, and Isaac introduced Penelope as his wife, Mrs. Norris. Hearing that name made Penelope's heart swell. It was not legal yet, but in every way that mattered, she was Isaac's wife and he was her husband. The journey west took 4 months. It was grueling and difficult, with harsh weather, difficult terrain, and constant challenges. But Isaac and Penelope faced it all together, side by side. They took their turn driving the wagon, cooking over campfires, standing watch at night. They became part of the wagon train community, making friends with the other families and helping each other through the hardships, and through it all, their love deepened and strengthened. They learned to work together, to support each other, to find joy even in difficult circumstances. Penelope discovered a strength in herself she had not known she possessed, and Isaac marveled at her resilience and determination. They crossed rivers and mountains, endured dust storms and torrential rains. They lost one of their oxen to a snake bite and had to trade some of Penelope's mother's jewelry for a replacement. They celebrated Penelope's 21st birthday with the wagon train, and Isaac gave her a ring he had fashioned from a piece of silver, slipping it onto her finger and promising her again that he would love her forever. In early May of 1879, the wagon train reached California. They settled in a small farming community in the Sacramento Valley, where land was available and the soil was rich. Isaac filed for a new land claim, and this time he filed it with Penelope's name beside his own as his wife. "We may not be legally married yet," he told her as they stood looking out over their new land, "but as far as I am concerned, you are my wife and this land belongs to both of us equally." They built a small cabin together, just as they had dreamed about back in New Mexico territory. This time, though, there was no need to hide their relationship or steal moments together. They were free to live openly as a married couple, to build a life together without fear. In the fall, they found a traveling judge who was willing to marry them officially. The ceremony took place in front of their half-built cabin, with a few of their new neighbors as witnesses. Penelope wore a simple dress she had sewn herself, and Isaac wore his best shirt and trousers. When the judge pronounced them husband and wife, Isaac kissed her with such joy and tenderness that several of the watching neighbors wiped away tears. That night in their cabin with a fire crackling in the hearth, Isaac and Penelope lay together as husband and wife, legally and truly united at last. "We did it," Penelope whispered, running her fingers through Isaac's hair. "We are really married. We really made it." "I never doubted we would," Isaac said, though they both knew that was not entirely true. There had been many moments of doubt, many times when their dream had seemed impossible, but they had persevered, and now they had everything they had ever wanted. Over the next few years, Isaac and Penelope built their farm into something prosperous. They planted crops and raised cattle, and slowly expanded their cabin into a proper house. They made friends in the community and became known as honest, hardworking people who could always be counted on to help a neighbor in need. In the spring of 1881, Penelope discovered she was pregnant. She told Isaac one morning at breakfast, watching nervously for his reaction. His face lit up with such pure joy that she burst into tears of happiness. "A baby," he said wonderingly, kneeling beside her chair and placing his hand gently on her still flat stomach. "We are going to have a baby." Their son was born in December of that year, healthy and strong, with his father's blue-green eyes and his mother's dark hair. They named him Thomas, after Isaac's father, and Isaac cried when he held his son for the first time, overwhelmed by love and gratitude. Penelope recovered well from the birth, and she took to motherhood with the same determination and grace she brought to everything else. Watching her with their son, Isaac felt his heart might burst from happiness. This woman, this incredible woman who had given up everything she knew to take a chance on a future with him, was now the mother of his child. Sometimes he could hardly believe his good fortune. Thomas was followed by a daughter, Mary, in 1883, and then another son, James, in 1885. The house filled with the sounds of children laughing and playing, and the land that Isaac and Penelope had claimed together became a true home. One evening in the summer of 1887, when Thomas was 5 and Mary was 4, and baby James was toddling around getting into everything, Isaac and Penelope sat together on the porch watching the sun set over their land. The children were finally asleep, the house was quiet, and they had a rare moment of peace. "You ever think about New Mexico territory?" Penelope asked, leaning her head on Isaac's shoulder. "About Chisholm Ranch and everything that happened there?" "Sometimes," Isaac admitted. "I think about the land I gave up, the claim I abandoned. But then I look around at what we have built here, at our children and our home, and I know I made the right choice. I would do it all again in a heartbeat." "I heard that Thornhill died," Penelope said quietly. "Mrs. Henderson wrote to me. She tracked me down somehow. I think Reverend Matthews must have told her where we went. She said Thornhill died of a stroke last year. She thought I would want to know." Isaac was silent for a moment. "How do you feel about that?" he finally asked. Penelope considered the question. "Sad," she said eventually. "Not for him, really, but sad that he spent his whole life accumulating land and money and power, and in the end he died alone with no one to mourn him. His funeral was apparently very well attended because he was important, but Mrs. Henderson said everyone was there out of obligation, not love. What a terrible legacy." "Very different from the legacy we are building," Isaac observed, gesturing to the house where their children slept. "Yes," Penelope agreed. "We may not have as much land or money, but we have something infinitely more valuable. We have love and family and a life we built together with our own hands." Isaac pulled her closer. "Do you regret it?" he asked. "Giving up your life back east, all the comfort and security for this hard life on the frontier?" "Never," Penelope said firmly, turning to look at him. "Isaac, you gave up your land claim for me. You walked away from everything you had worked for because you loved me. How could I do anything less? What is comfort and security compared to love? What is any of it worth if you are not there to share it with me?" Isaac kissed her then, deep and sweet, tasting of the coffee they had drunk after dinner and the life they had built together. When they broke apart, both of them were smiling. "I love you," Isaac said. "I have loved you from the moment I saw you crying by that creek, and I will love you until the day I die." "I love you too," Penelope replied. "Thank you for being brave enough to give up everything for me. Thank you for showing me that there was another way, another life possible. Thank you for loving me." They sat together as the stars came out overhead, talking quietly about their plans for the farm, about the children's futures, about the life they would continue building together. The night was warm and peaceful, and in the distance, they could hear the sound of cattle lowing and the rustle of the crops in the breeze. This was home. This was family. This was everything they had sacrificed for and fought for and dreamed of. And it was worth every hardship, every difficulty, every moment of fear and uncertainty. Because they had each other, and that made all the difference. As the years passed, Isaac and Penelope's farm prospered. Their children grew strong and healthy, learning to work the land alongside their parents. Thomas showed a talent for working with animals, spending hours with the cattle and horses. Mary loved to read and study, and Penelope taught her everything she knew, passing on her love of books and learning. James was the adventurous one, always climbing trees and exploring the creek, reminding his parents very much of Isaac in his younger days. In 1890, Penelope gave birth to twins, another girl and boy they named Sarah and Samuel. The house was now bursting with life and noise, and Isaac had to expand it again, adding more rooms to accommodate their growing family. They had help on the farm now, too. As the children got older, they took on more responsibilities, and Isaac hired a few ranch hands to help with the heavier work. The farm was producing enough that they could afford to pay fair wages, and Isaac prided himself on treating his workers well, remembering his own days as a hired hand. Penelope became known in the community as a woman of great kindness and intelligence. She started a small school on their property, teaching not just her own children, but also the children of neighboring farms who had no other access to education. She taught them reading and writing and arithmetic, and in the process, she fulfilled a dream she had not even known. She had the dream of making a real difference in the world. Isaac watched her teaching the children one afternoon, her face animated as she explained something from a history book, and felt his love for her surge even stronger. This woman who had started as a frightened, trapped bride had blossomed into someone confident and capable, someone who brought light into other people's lives. He was so proud of her he could barely stand it. One evening in 1892, as they were getting ready for bed, Penelope said, "I received a letter today from Reverend Matthews. He is retiring and moving to California to be near his daughter. He says he wants to visit us." "That would be wonderful," Isaac said warmly. "We owe him so much. If not for him, we might never have found each other again." Reverend Matthews came to visit that summer, and it was a joyous reunion. He was older now, his hair completely white, but his eyes were still kind and his smile was still warm. He stayed for a week, and during that time, he got to know the whole family, playing with the children and helping Isaac with farm work, and having long conversations with Penelope about books and philosophy. On his last evening with them, they all sat together on the expanded porch, Isaac and Penelope, and their 5 children and Reverend Matthews watching the sun set. "You have built something beautiful here," Reverend Matthews said, looking around at the farm, the happy children, the obvious love between Isaac and Penelope. "When I helped you escape that night, I hoped and prayed that you would find happiness, but this exceeds anything I could have imagined." "We could not have done it without you," Penelope said, reaching over to squeeze his hand. "You risked so much to help us." "It was the right thing to do," Reverend Matthews said simply. "Love should never be a prison. Love should be free and joyful and life-giving, like what you two have created together." After Reverend Matthews left, Penelope found herself thinking about his words. Love should be free and joyful and life-giving. That was exactly what she and Isaac had, a love that had given them this incredible life, these beautiful children, this sense of purpose and meaning. She thought back to that frightened girl who had stepped off the stagecoach in Chisholm, ranch all those years ago, bound for a loveless marriage she had not chosen. That girl would never have believed she could be this happy, this fulfilled. But then Isaac had come into her life, and everything had changed. He had shown her that there was another way, that she did not have to accept the fate that had been chosen for her. He had been willing to give up everything, his land, his dream, his future, just to be with her. What's mine means nothing if you're not there. That was what he had said to her, and he had meant it. And in the end, by giving up what he had gained so much more. They both had. As the children grew older and began to think about their own futures, Isaac and Penelope made sure they knew the whole story of how their parents had come to be together. They did not hide the truth about Penelope's first marriage or the risks they had taken to be together. "We want you to understand," Penelope told them one evening when they were all gathered in the parlor, "that love is the most important thing, more important than money or status or security. Your father gave up his land claim for me. He was willing to sacrifice everything he had worked for because he loved me and wanted us to be together. And I have never regretted it for a single moment," Isaac added, pulling Penelope close. "The land meant nothing without her. All the success and prosperity in the world would have meant nothing if I had to live without the woman I loved." Thomas, now 11 and already showing signs of becoming a fine young man like his father, looked thoughtful. "So you are saying we should marry for love, not for practical reasons?" "We are saying you should never settle for less than real love," Penelope said. "Life is too short and too precious to spend it with someone who does not make your heart sing." The children took that lesson to heart. When Thomas grew up, he married a neighbor girl he had known since childhood, a sweet girl named Emily who made him laugh. Mary became a teacher like her mother, and eventually married a widower with 2 children, creating a large blended family filled with love and chaos. James became a cowboy, spending years working on various ranches before finally settling down with a rancher's daughter and starting his own small spread near his parents' farm. The twins, Sarah and Samuel, were the last to marry, but when they did, they both chose partners who clearly adored them, continuing the family tradition of marrying for love rather than convenience. Isaac and Penelope lived to see all their children married and happy, and to meet many of their grandchildren. They continued working the farm well into their later years, though eventually they turned over the day-to-day operations to Thomas and his family, who had moved into the house to help care for the land, and for Isaac and Penelope as they aged. One evening in the spring of 1910, Isaac and Penelope sat together in rocking chairs on the porch, watching the sun set just as they had done countless times over the past 32 years. They were both in their 70s now, their hair white and their faces lined with age, but when they looked at each other, they still saw the young people who had fallen in love by a creek in New Mexico territory all those years ago. "You remember the first time we met?" Penelope asked, her hand clasped in Isaac's. "How could I forget?" Isaac replied. "You were crying by the creek, and I thought you were the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. I fell in love with you right then and there, though I did not admit it to myself for a while." "I fell in love with you then too," Penelope said. "Or maybe it was when you sat down on that rock and started talking to me like I was a real person, not just a piece of property. You gave me hope when I had none. You gave me a reason to live," Isaac said. "Before I met you, I thought land and success were what mattered. But you showed me that the only thing that really matters is love. Having someone to share your life with, someone who understands you and supports you and makes every day better just by being in it." Penelope leaned her head on Isaac's shoulder, and they sat in comfortable silence, listening to the sounds of the farm settling down for the night. Inside the house, They could hear their grandchildren playing and their daughter-in-law preparing dinner. Their life was full and rich and meaningful. "Thank you," Penelope said softly. "For what?" Isaac asked. "For being willing to give up your land claim for me. For saying that what was yours meant nothing if I was not there. For loving me enough to sacrifice everything." "Thank you for coming back to me," Isaac replied. "For being brave enough to escape and find me when you could have stayed in safety. For choosing love over security." They kissed, gentle and sweet, and then sat watching as the stars began to appear in the darkening sky. They had built a good life together, a life filled with love and family and purpose. They had faced challenges and hardships, but they had faced them together, and that had made all the difference. Isaac Norris passed away peacefully in his sleep in the fall of 1911 at the age of 74, surrounded by his wife, children, and grandchildren. His last words were to Penelope, a whispered "I love you" that she held close to her heart. Penelope lived for another 5 years, dying in the spring of 1916 at the age of 78. She spent those final years surrounded by her family, telling stories of her life with Isaac, and making sure that future generations would know the story of their great love. On her deathbed, surrounded by her children and many of her grandchildren, Penelope held the silver ring Isaac had made for her on the journey to California. She looked at each of her children in turn and said, "Never forget what you have means nothing if you do not have someone to share it with. Your father taught me that. He gave up everything for love, and because he did, we gained everything that truly matters. Always choose love. Always." Those were her last words, and they became a sort of family motto passed down through the generations. The farm that Isaac and Penelope had built together stayed in the family, worked by their descendants who remembered the story of how it all began with a cowboy who gave up his land claim for the woman he loved, who understood that what's mine means nothing if you're not there. Their graves sit side by side on a small hill overlooking the farm, under a large oak tree they had planted together in their first year on the land. The headstones are simple, but the inscription is clear. Isaac Norris, beloved husband and father, and Penelope Norris, beloved wife and mother, together forever. And if you visit that farm today, more than 100 years later, you will still find descendants of Isaac and Penelope working the land, telling the story of their ancestors who were brave enough to choose love over everything else, who understood that the only thing that really matters in life is having someone to share it with, someone who makes even the hardest days bearable and the good days magnificent. It is a love story for the ages, a reminder that real love is worth any sacrifice, and that what we own means nothing if we cannot share it with those we love. Isaac gave up his land claim, his dream, everything he had worked for, because he understood that simple truth. And in giving it up, he gained something far more valuable: a lifetime of love with the woman who held his heart, and a legacy that would endure for generations. That is the true treasure, the real measure of a life well lived, not in acres of land or heads of cattle or dollars in the bank, but in love given and received, in family built and nurtured, in choosing again and again to value people over possessions and relationships over riches. Isaac and Penelope Norris understood that truth, lived it every day of their lives together, and passed it down to all who came after them. Theirs was a love that changed everything, that transformed two separate lives into one beautiful story of courage, sacrifice, and enduring devotion. And that love echoes still through the generations of their descendants, a reminder that the best things in life are not things at all, but the people we share our lives with and the love we build together, one day at a time, one choice at a time, one sacrifice at a time. What's mine means nothing if you're not there. Isaac said those words, and he meant them with every fiber of his being. And because he did, because he and Penelope were brave enough to act on that truth, they built something that lasted far beyond their own lives, a legacy of love that continues to inspire and guide their family even now, more than a century later. That is the power of real love, the kind of love that is willing to sacrifice everything, that understands that possessions and property mean nothing compared to the joy of being with the one person who makes life worth living. Isaac and Penelope had that kind of love, and it was worth everything they gave up to find it. Their story ended not in tragedy but in triumph, two lives well lived, two hearts joined in perfect union, and a family built on the foundation of a love so strong it could overcome any obstacle. They faced a world that tried to keep them apart, laws that said they could not be together, social conventions that demanded they sacrifice their happiness for propriety. But they refused to accept that fate. They chose each other again and again, no matter the cost, and in the end they won. Not just a temporary victory, but something permanent and lasting. They built a life together that was full of joy and meaning, raised children who understood the value of real love, and created a legacy that would endure long after they were gone. That is the real happy ending, not just that they ended up together, but that they built something beautiful and lasting, something that continued to touch lives and change hearts long after their own story was complete. The farm is still there, the family still thriving, and the love story of Isaac and Penelope Norris still being told to each new generation as an example of what real love looks like, what it costs, and what it can achieve when two people are brave enough to choose it above all else.